Listen, so many changes in this Bengals offense this offseason. Starts on the sidelines, too. Brian Callahan taking that Titans head coaching job, which left them with the OC opening, so they fill it with Dan Pitcher when they elevate him from quarterbacks coach. And then on the field, just look at this. Burrow's going to have a new partner in the backfield. They decide to move on from Joe Mixon. They bring in Zach Moss as the new lead back. When you look at all these changes, Hawk, do you have any concern this offense is going to take a step back?
As long as number 9 is there and healthy, I have the same level of concern that Marcus won't be using the word damn in a broadcast. That means none. Zero concern, okay? Because Joe Burrow himself is a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. And when you have a top 3 cornerback, what you know is he makes everybody on this offense better. You don't need all the weapons that some of these other offenses need to be successful because Joe Burrow can fill in that gap in a big way. The number 2 reason is they have Jamar Chase. So you have a top 3 quarterback in Joe Burrow, and now you have a top 5 wide receiver in Jamar Chase. That is more than enough for this offense to keep pace. And the last reason, and probably the most important, is the Cincinnati Bengals have a confidence in themselves and Duke Tobin and the Brown family of finding wide receiver talent beyond the first round. Look at the history. It will tell you everything you need to know. You have Tyler Boyd. You got Chad Ochocinco in the third round. Gorgeous. You got Mohamed Sanu. You got Marvin Jones, TJ Hushmanzada. You name it. This is what this organization has historically been great at for the last few decades. So do they want T. Higgins? Absolutely. Does he make their offense better? No question. He's the number 1 wide receiver playing the number 2 position. But they feel really good about their ability to go find more weapons, and they feel really good about Jamar Chase, number 1, and the guy that they got at the quarterback position.
This was one of the hardest offseason questions for me when we were talking about this. I was talking to Coco, one of our producers, about this because it's about what Cincinnati prioritizes. And then I start thinking about it like, hold on a second. Joe Burrow has missed time. Jamar Chase has missed time. And sometimes we forget about the availability of these guys at points. And will you have enough to back that up? Because last season, T. Higgins was available when Jamar Chase was hurt. And it absolutely helped this team try to make a run late, even without Joe Burrow, try to get into the playoffs and have some success. So I thought about the depth perspective more so than just how good the opposite player is of Jamar Chase when you start talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, because we have to. And the reason we have to is because they in the damn AFC, man. They go to word damn. Mm-hmm. Their division, coupled with so much talent, we've seen Patrick Mahomes pull a wide receiver unit that we didn't think was very good, and Rishi Rice ascend at the end of the season to become the wide receiver that he needed. But ultimately, when you look at Cincinnati, if I'm them and I'm drafting, I'm going to prioritize my depth, and I'm going to prioritize what is the most important position for us to get in this draft. Whether that be trying to replace T. Higgins, whether that be the cornerback position. They've tried to solidify this offensive line already. I'm going with the most important position of need if I'm them, as opposed to thinking about we need to replace T. Higgins with a pick.
Yeah, they have the 18th pick in the draft, by the way, but this all comes back to one single thing, Adam. That is the health of Joe Burrow, which has not been good. And they have gotten off to slow starts the last couple of seasons. And what can you tell us? What's the latest going into this next one?
He had the surgery when he initially hurt himself against the Baltimore Ravens, then had screws taken out the week after the Super Bowl. By the way, still couldn't shake people's hands at the Super Bowl back then. So I think that tells you it was a very significant injury that he has to overcome. And they're counting on him being ready, but it is a notable injury that involved a couple of different procedures. And so Joe Burrow is being counted on, but it's significant enough. And he's had so many things that he's had to bounce back from. Always has done it. But they need him on the field. They need him healthy. And it so far has been a struggle to stay healthy in Cincinnati.
And Tim, from a quarterback standpoint, and this injury in particular, if you can walk us through the challenges that he might face.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something I'm familiar with, not super common, personally, and not super common for quarterbacks. But you hear Adam talk about the significance and severity of it, the fact that, look, it shut him down. It was something he was trying to, I think, kind of deal with, and then it became a bigger issue. And you just never know how guys come back from it. And I will say, look, oftentimes we will talk about a player's ability to stay healthy, and I feel like, and maybe the other guys that, former players think think of it the same way. We often tie that to somebody's toughness, and that's just not always the case. There are times where, listen, you don't know why a guy pops an Achilles. You don't know why somebody tears their ACL, or there's a situation like this. Joe Burrow's tough, period. Watch him play. Watch him stand in the pocket. Got plenty of courage, and he's tough. But sometimes these things just get out of your control, and next thing you know, you just become a guy that, for whatever reason, can't stay healthy. And I do think, well, look, I agree with Hawk, and I agree with Marcus. Like, as long as he's healthy and going, they're going to be a contending team. But that's starting to become a big if.
Yeah, and even going back to his college days, he did battle injury and thrived there. He's done the same thing in the NFL. When healthy, he is just one of a handful of elite quarterbacks. All right. To the NFL, and Baltimore entered the playoffs as the AFC's top seed. Lamar Jackson, as you know, won his second career MVP, but ultimately, of course, their season ended with that AFC championship loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. In an attempt to bolster their offense, they added Derrick Henry in free agency. He is on a streak of 6 straight seasons with 10 or more rushing touchdowns, third longest all time. However, they lost key pieces on the defensive side of the ball. Patrick Queen, Jadeveon Clowney ranking second in tackles and sacks for them last season, both with new homes. Here's John Harbaugh today on the involvement of his quarterback, Lamar, in the draft.
Lamar, he's been tasked over the text, world with a couple of assignments, right? So we'll see who he likes, and he looks at guys on tape. And he's never been shy about giving his opinion on free agents or the draft. So he hasn't weighed in quite yet, but he will.
I think that's interesting, Adam. I'm not sure how common that is with quarterbacks having that level of say, but certainly one of his stature, it makes a lot of sense. They start their draft with pick number 30. What are you hearing about how they're going to attack this draft?
Well, Tim used to have that kind of say with the New York Giants when he played quarterback, and they would defer to him when they were making free agent and draft decisions as well.
Sure.
So it's no surprise to see that the Baltimore Ravens would do that with Lamar Jackson. Now, keep in mind, Hannah, the Ravens had a number of offseason losses along the offensive line. They lost John Simpson, a guard, to the New York Jets. They traded Morgan Moses to the Jets. They lost Kevin Zeitler to the Detroit Lions. So there are 3 offensive linemen that they lost. Now, the Ravens have always done a great job of finding talent at various spots, but there clearly seems to be some sort of need. And I don't know how well Lamar Jackson knows offensive line talent and techniques, but clearly he must be lobbying for more help up front, because that's certainly an area where the Ravens will be looking in a draft that is considered to be deep along the interior part of the offensive line.
Yeah, maybe he's just saying, get me a good one, fellas. Get me the best available. Now, Tim, but now is your chance. You may not have been able to do it back in the day, but why don't you, get inside Lamar Jackson's head? I mean, if you were him, what would you like to see in the draft?
Well, first, let me just say I'm thankful that Adam has such a good memory. It's important for everyone to realize that. Here's what I would say, for Lamar Jackson. Like, I think back to a year ago, guys, there was so much uncertainty about, okay, what will this offense look like with Todd Monken, the new offensive coordinator? Will Lamar develop as a passer? Will the receivers that they've invested in start to come along? I think we are in a drastically different spot today than we were a year ago. Lamar really improved as a passer. The offense improved as the season went along. Zay Flowers looked to be a guy that they're going to be able to count on. Isaiah Likely came along when Mark Andrews was injured. And so, like the pieces around him in terms of skill position players really did step up. Do they need to invest in the offensive line? Yes, they do, and they will. It's just kind of the DNA of that organization. They'll do that, and Lamar makes them better up front because of how you have to try to defend him. So, look, I think that John Harbaugh's, the way he's embraced Lamar's, input in things, I think is probably refreshing for Lamar and other quarterbacks around the league to see how it can go. But I don't know that as we sit here today that we can say, that, when you consider where they were a year ago, even with the offensive line changes, that they're not in a significantly better spot than they were 1 year year ago.
Yeah, they actually have the third best odds to win the Super Bowl, at least at this point, according to ESPN Bet, behind the Niners and the Chiefs.